There's corruption in every organization on the face of the earth.
Was there ever a decision like, hey, he has to go?
Michael Franzese was once one of the highest ranking
mob bosses in American history.
He now helps people achieve success in business and life.
With over 2 million YouTube subscribers.
He's one of the most influential mentors on the internet.
There's a thought process that people go around killing each other all day. That's not the way it is. And the government doesn't care as long as the lie is fitting into the story. They don't care.
Were you just kind of like, I'm solving the next problem, I'm moving day to day?
I didn't live in a vacuum. I knew that my boss was coming after me.
And were you involved in those deaths in any way at all? So you were an underboss of one of the most notorious crime families in the world. Fortune put you at number 18 at just 35 years old. You were bringing in $10 million a week in cash. In cash. That's not normal for a 35-year-old.
No, it's not, but let me make one minor corrections before we get beat up. I wasn't the underboss. I was a capo regime, which is a street boss, and had a number of men that were placed under me. But yeah, I was very fortunate. I came upon a scheme. It was illegal to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline. And we started out pretty modestly. I mean, the first 2 weeks we did $320,000, and I guess that's modest compared to what we ended up doing. And I ran that operation for about close to 8 years, and at the height we were doing between $8 and $10 million a week, yes. Most of it in cash, yes.
$10 million a week in cash?
Yeah.
That's a lot of cash.
A lot of money.
If you took everything you built, the network, the capital, the people, and ran it legally, what would that company look like today?
Oh, I mean, it would be a Fortune 500 company, I would assume. We'd have a lot of employees, and we'd be doing pretty well. I mean, I would have exited at this point, but for a big sum. But it was a big operation, and the thing is that yes, we were defrauding the government out of tax money, but we were also giving it back to consumers at the pumps because we were charging less for our gasoline than anybody else. So they were getting a reward for this. That's why they called us the Robin Hood at that time. And people weren't upset with us; they were actually happy. But it was a lot involved in getting it right and having longevity in it, and we were able to do that.
And at that scale, what was the thing you were spending the most time managing?
It's managing people, and at that time it was an intricate system on how to get almost a year out of every license that we had. You had to be licensed to collect the tax. And we had to put a real intricate system in place in order to continue that for about a year until the government would come down on us and come down on that company, which was a shell company, which disappeared when the government finally came down, and we just moved to another company that we had. So it was a pretty intricate scheme.
And it took them a long time to figure that out.
They would
figure
never
out who was behind it.
Well, they would never have figured it out. It's just that I had a partner that got himself in trouble, and he was the architect of the scheme along with me. As a matter of fact, I give him most of the credit. But he got himself in trouble, and I was the target. And so he, in order to help himself get a lighter sentence, he came after me, and he told them the whole operation. We'd still be doing it now. They couldn't figure it out.
And you were just 35, right? And so walk me through this. People are, and let's give the context to the viewers. You were 35. Most of the other people that were higher ranking and were much older than you. Were people maybe looking at you like you're vulnerable because of your age? And how did you maybe demand that respect at that age?
Well, actually, I was 35 when this thing came to an end. I started this I was 28 when it really came on me. And yeah, I was one of the younger guys. And, you always have resentment in that life because there were people in that life that were there 20, 30 years before me. And here I am making all this money, having my own jet plane, my own helicopter, and having a big crew under me. So I had to deal with resentment from the older guys. And even though I outranked them at one point, I always tried to give them, a lot of respect. Hey, you were here a long time. I respect, your position in this life. Because I learned, you're going to come across that in life. When you're young and successful, the people on top are going to be looking at you and why isn't that me? So it's always better to give them extra respect and treat them like, I would say, hey, you want to come for a ride on my plane anytime you need it? You know, if I can help you in any way, I'd be happy to. And you kind of, you kind of dissipate some of the resentment that's coming after you. But I've learned that throughout my life. You know, it's better to make, I always said this, best way to defeat your enemies, make them your friends. And that's worked to a great degree, unless you can't. But you always try to do that first.
Yeah, you talk a lot about respect, right? That's really important because if you're disrespectful, something very bad can happen.
In that life, yes, because people remember that. You know, I think one of the reasons that I was able to walk away from that life, even though people were upset with the fact that I walked away, they didn't hate me. They didn't dislike me, because I didn't let them get to that point during that life. So I think that's one of the reasons why I'm, alive and free today, and very happy about that, obviously.
And loyalty seems to be something that's also really important in that life and in this life too. What's the difference between someone who's maybe genuinely loyal to you when you were in that life and someone who's maybe just afraid to leave? And kind of which type of people did you want around you at that time?
Well, there's loyalty and then there's false loyalty. People are loyal for whatever, because of what they can get from you, if they can make money with you, if you're an advantage to them in some way. And you find that out in that life pretty quick. For instance, I had a ton of friends on the street. Everybody wanted to be around me. When I went to jail, I had one or two. Then people get scared, I was an advantage to them at one point, but maybe I'm a disadvantage now. So you find that out pretty quick. It's what I told my wife when I went to prison. I said, hey, don't expect anything from anyone. Nothing. Fortunately, I can handle you and take care of you while I'm away. Don't expect anything, and don't be disappointed, because that's life. And so I think I was prepared for that, because I watched my father go to prison with all the friends that he had, and then it was me, when he went to prison. So I get it.
And at that young of an age, right, you said you were 28 to 35, kind of in the prime of kind of running this scheme. What does, punishment look like for someone who is disrespectful, disloyal, right? How did you walk through or think through a decision that could potentially end someone's freedom or their life? Well,
and that makes serious mistakes in that life you can pay for with your life. So you're always aware of that. We had certain policies that we had to abide by. And if we didn't, the consequences could have been severe. And there were times when, for political reasons, whatever, that people suffered serious consequences when I believe they shouldn't have, So you have to deal with all of that in that life. One thing I learned to my dad taught me a lot. He was a good student of the life, and I was a good listener. When somebody knows more than me, until this day, I'm happy to listen and learn. I don't find anything demeaning in that. You could always learn something. But I was always, in that life, you have to be very, very slow to pass judgment on someone. Very slow. Be the last one to condemn somebody, because your turn is going to come, and people are going to remember how you treated other people. So always be the last one to condemn, the last one to point the finger. And something like that works very much in your favor, and it certainly did with mine when my time came, and it came.
Right, because you talked about sit-downs. Yeah. Sit-downs, Michael.
Yes, we're having one now.
We are, but these are different types of sit-downs back then.
Yes.
And so what was that process like, right? When there's going to be a sit-down, there's decisions that have to be made that could potentially, like I said, end someone's life. What does that look like?
Well, I sat at those tables, and because I was a cop regime, a captain, and that's part of your job, I would say, is deciding fate for other people. And there were many times, unfortunately it happened many times, when somebody could have suffered severe consequences based upon decisions that were made at that table. The boss ultimately has the decision. He has decision, life or death. And so I was always very careful to voice my opinion in the right way. And normally I was always for the underdog. Maybe we should give this guy another chance. Maybe we got to rethink this. I always took that position. But when somebody was ultimately at fault and you couldn't really defend him, you have to say, well, that's the way it goes, that's the way it goes. But again, I was always the last one to make that decision.
Was there ever a decision that felt like clean? Like, hey, he did this, he has to go.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
And what does making those type of decisions do to the rest of your life, right? Does everything else kind of now just feel very small in comparison?
I would say so, yeah. Those are tough decisions to make. But the way we justified it is, hey, look, we took an oath. And we were told when we took that oath that we had certain policies to follow. And if you didn't follow those policies and rules, you could pay for it with your life. So we all accepted that, and we all knew what the rules were. So you justify it. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, because who really has the right to tell anybody whether they're going to live or die? Maybe we have a justice system that says that, even though I don't believe in the death penalty. But it's a tough decision to make and to live with after all, throughout your life. And look, I still think about it at times. Think about people that I knew that were there one day and gone the next. But again, you justify it at that time. Hey, he knew the rules. We all accepted it. Our eyes were open. Nobody forced us into this. So if you break the rules, you know the consequences. And that's how we justified it.
Right, because the consequences were, let's say you're in that sit down and there's someone that did something that was totally out of line, and most likely, a decision is going to be made at the end of the day, and that person's going to lose their life. If you, for example, stood up and said, no, and maybe went on the other side of the things, and maybe lied, maybe did whatever you had to do to save that person, you're putting your own life and maybe your family's life on the line by doing that. Is that right?
Well, here's the thing. You could be at a sit down and there could be 6 of us there, and 5 of them will agree that this guy's got to suffer. And you can stand up and say, well, I disagree. I'm not going to do anything to stop it, because ultimately the decision is not mine. It's up to the boss. But my decision is no, I don't agree with that. So you can do that, and you're not going to be in trouble for it. Now, if it comes to the point where the boss says, okay, but you're going to have to carry it out, that could happen too. Well, you can't refuse that assignment. You can ask to be excused of it, but if he says, no, that's my decision, well, that's his decision, and you have to abide by it, or you put your own life at stake. Can't refuse an order.
Yeah, so if you're given an order to do something and you don't do that, you're putting your own life, potentially your family's life on the line.
Correct.
Right.
Well, not your family. I want to be clear on that. Yeah, I want to be clear on that, because a lot of people think that, we went after families. We did not do that. But you put yourself on the line, yes.
You mentioned maybe forgiving or you standing up for the underdog. Tell me about that. Maybe there were times where you were like, look, this person shouldn't be harmed or punished for this. Tell me about some of those situations.
Well, as I sit here, I can honestly say that I never put that condemnation on anyone. There's another term you can use that say, hey, put him on the shelf, meaning put him out of the life. He has no more authority here. We don't respect him anymore. Just put him out. You can do that. It's kind of a cop-out, honestly, because they're normally not going to do that. If the violation was considered serious enough that you're deciding whether this person is going to live or die, then there's no putting them on the shelf. But that's a way out, and I've used that.
You've used that. Yeah. So on the forgiving side, there's times where maybe you didn't punish someone, or you raised your hand for someone not to be punished that maybe you should have.
Yeah.
Because that's an evil life, and maybe you didn't start to realize that till a little bit down the line. You talk about that life as it's an evil life now.
Well, the problem is that, people were condemned for the wrong reasons. Could have been political, could have been over money, and it shouldn't have been. Could have been, we just want to eliminate this guy, so we'll find a reason to do that. It's like anything else. Look, I believe there's corruption in every organization on the face of the earth, from the government to the church to everything in between, to charities. There's always corruption. I'm not saying everything is corrupt, but there is corruption in everything. And so in the street life, of course, that applies, right? There is corruption there. So people get, condemned for the wrong reasons. It's the same way I just said I don't believe in a death sentence, because people make mistakes. And if you, as a civilized government, put one person to death that was wrongly put to death, then the whole system falls apart. You can't kill an innocent person. And unfortunately, 202 people on death row were freed because of DNA evidence. They would have died if it wasn't for that. They were wrongly convicted. So you can't have the death penalty, no matter how heinous the crime was. Put them in jail for the rest of their life, put them in solitary. Believe me, that's punishment. So the same way on the street. I don't believe we should condemn people to death. It's just my opinion.
Right. And maybe a big part of why you believe that is because people can change or can turn their life around and do good in the world because you're doing just that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about your story in just a second.
I have to say this. I read an article today about the son of Sam. I don't know if you remember that case. In New York, he killed a bunch of people. Well, he's been in jail for over 40 years. He's given his life to Christ. He's a Christian. He refuses parole because he knows he's going to die in prison, and he feels that he's forgiven because his faith is genuine. I actually met with him. I interviewed him, and I believe his faith is genuine. A lot of people are saying he should rot in hell and he should die and all of that, and he should have been put to death. He's done 40 some odd years in prison. He's going to die there. That's a tough situation. I know. I spent three years in solitary confinement. It's not a life that you want to live. So I'm forgiving in that way because people can change, and it's up to God to decide their fate later on.
Guys, we've been so passionate about finding the biggest geniuses, and this is just one of the many episodes. If you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, make sure to subscribe. All right, let's get back to the episode. And so let's go back to the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Take me back to Brooklyn, right? What was it like actually growing up as Sonny Franzese's son? Not kind of the story you've told before, but what did it feel like inside of that house?
It had its good points, and then it had its very difficult points because our life was very turbulent. Because my father was such a high-profile figure. I loved my dad. I idolized him as a kid, idolized him. And he was a great father for me growing up in my younger years, no question. Taught me well, taught me how to be respectful, how to have discipline, accept authority, treat women right. So he said all the right things to me. But it was very turbulent because my dad was always under investigation, always being locked up, always going to jail, always going to trial. So, and he had a lot of publicity. So I was dealing with kids, hey, your dad's a Mafia dad, fight in a schoolyard. I had a lot of that. So it had its good points and it had its difficult times.
When did you actually understand what your father did? Not maybe when you were told it, but like when did you feel like, whoa, like something's different here?
Well, I understood it early on because it wasn't that he sat down and talked to me about it, but I read it in the media. I heard it from others. I saw it happening. So I understood that he was something. But, the thing is, I would never want to believe that my dad would do anything wrong. Oh, your dad's a killer. No, he's not. I don't believe that, because he would have told me. So it's kind of naive, I guess, at that point, just a kid idolizing his father. But I never wanted to believe anything bad about my dad.
Like so many of us. And so there were other kids that were growing up probably in that same world who went in a different direction. You didn't go directly into the mob, right? Your path was different, right? You were on the path to be a doctor, from what I know. And so you had a different path. What do you think separated you from maybe the kids that grew up in that life that wanted to get into it?
I had no desire to follow in my father's footsteps. I wanted to play center field for the New York Yankees because Mickey Mantle, I idolized him. I love baseball till today. I love the Yankees. But no, I never had that desire. I did want to be a doctor because my dad wanted me to be a doctor. He said, you're going to be the first professional in the family. I have faith in you. You can do it. So to please him, I went into the medical field. I was a pre-med student. And yeah, I wanted it, but I think I wanted it more because he wanted it for me. That's how much I cared about him. My dad was smart enough not to want me to come into that life. He wanted me to create a life for myself outside of that life. Whereas many of the other fathers wanted their sons to follow him. There's a lot of nepotism in that life. They bring in their sons, their nephews, a lot of nepotism. But my dad kept me away from that. So I think that's why a lot of the kids aspired to be that way. And they followed in their father's footsteps.
Yeah, you have such a unique story, right? You're someone that was born into a crime family, right? You managed to do the time and you came out to see the other side of it like few have done, right? Has that changed the way you maybe see people that come from a similar background to yours?
Well, yeah, I try to give people grace. I try to understand. Look, I've spoken to thousands of these gangbangers. I did time in prison with them. And I sit down and have a conversation with them, and I understand what chance do these kids have. They grow up in a tough neighborhood. Normally, 80% of them don't have a father figure. And for the other 20%, the father isn't adding much value to the raising these kids. So they get out into the street, they get with the local gangbanger, they're trying to earn a living, their mom is normally young and can't hardly provide. So they get into the street life. Well, what do you expect? I mean, I have a son who almost went in the wrong direction, and he had everything at his favor growing up. So kids need guidance, they need a father figure, they need to be shown how to live, and they don't have that. So I try to give people the benefit of the doubt and try to understand what brought them into that circumstance. So I look at things a little bit differently because I understand. And I believe, young people, they want to do the right thing initially, but they're so influenced by their environment and the people that they're in contact with that they don't have a chance. It's really sad. And what do I attribute this to? The breakup of the family. Everything starts in your family. And if you don't have that cohesiveness, that bond, that relationship, you're in trouble from early on.
And what are you telling those kids, the kids that you're speaking with today, that you're trying to help put on the right path? Maybe they're over here now, and you're trying to push them over here, and obviously you're not going to be involved in their day-to-day life, right? And you can't replace them having a father figure. What are some of the things that you do to try to push them in the right direction? Well,
I try to tell them it's a dead-end street. The mob life, the gang life, you're in any organized criminal activity, you don't have a chance. Because you may be a one-off, like today we have some loose laws out there, but if you're involved in any organized criminal activity, you're going down. There's no future in it. And I explain that to them, and I tell them, look, don't feel sorry for yourself that you didn't have a good home life. You have to start today. And there is a way out of this thing. I got a way out, and you guys can do it too. And I tell them, I left the biggest gang in the world, so don't tell me you can't. There is a way. And it's very effective because fortunately the platform I have, everybody believes that the Mafia is the most organized criminal organization in the world. Maybe it is. I mean, you have the Mexican cartels, you have the Russian mob, you have a lot of different organized groups and different ethnic backgrounds. But we're certainly, up there. And, because of the media, look, we've been given the most attention. No other criminal organization has been romanticized like the Mafia. In movies, in television, in media, you name it, we have been. So people look up to that if you're on the street. And so I have a pretty good impact on them. And I think I've led a lot of them in the right direction, over the past 30 years that I've been speaking.
Yeah, and you talked about the media publicizing the mob and Mafia, and especially back then, I'm guessing even maybe more so. Let's go back to that Fortune magazine, right? Fortune magazine, they put you number 18, you're just 35 years old, you're one of the most powerful mob figures or mob bosses, right, in America. Was any part of you proud of that a little bit?
I was kind of surprised when I saw the article. I was in prison when it came out, and they happened to lock me down because I was getting so much publicity. The writer of that article was appearing on every show, and they only featured 6 of us out of the 50, and I was one of the 6. So he kept talking about me. When you're in prison, they don't like that, so they locked me down for a while, but it was kind of funny to me. But it was a silly list because they didn't ask for our tax returns. How do they make a list like that? Some guys that were on the list didn't belong there, but it was... it was kind of eye-opening, I would say, because I had publicity to that point, but that was like, whoa, you're really putting me up there. And listen, how did I feel about it? I was kind of mad that they locked me down as a result of it, but it's gone in my favor. It's amazing how things happen, because now that article was a big deal. Hey, this is one of the most powerful guys in America, so it gave me more juice, more credibility when I spoke, and I used it to my advantage.
Yeah, I mean, coming from being a mob underboss's son, you built one of the biggest criminal empires that was said to be worth over $1 billion at that time. You survived a death sentence from your own people, and now you talk about it on podcasts. Which part of that is actually the defining chapter for you?
The fact that I'm at 75 years old, I'm alive and free and being able to share this with people, that in itself is pretty amazing. Because remember, I didn't go into any witness protection program. I sat down with the government, but I didn't cooperate to a level where I put people in prison. I just wanted them to understand that I was out of the life because nobody believed it originally. The government said, this is another scam, he's pulling another con. I said, no. I mean, I'm putting my life in danger now to show you people that I'm out. But I'm not going to cooperate to the extent. I'm not going to hurt my friends. It's not what I wanted to do. So it was a real tightrope that I had to walk to get through this. And I didn't know. Look, I don't hold my former associates short in any way. They're very, very capable. Just a lot of things broke in my favor, to have me be where I am now. Because could they have killed me if they really put an effort into it? Very possibly. I mean, I knew the life. I knew what to do and what not to do. I had an advantage in that I lived the life for 20 years, so I knew how they would come at me. But a lot of things had to work in my advantage. And I think, again, as a person of faith, I think it was God's plan for my life to bring me to where I am today.
Yeah, and you said, if I'm not mistaken, you kind of outlived a lot of those people, or a lot of them ended up dead, ended up in jail. Are there any of those people that are still around today? And are you still every now and then having to look over your shoulder?
I know for sure on that list, 48 of them are dead out of the 50. Number 49 was in prison. Last time I looked, he was older than me. I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know if he's free. So I'm really the only survivor on that list that had a life. So, I mean, what does that tell you? And it's only been 30 some odd years. So all these people are gone in the last 30 some odd years. So, I mean, is it shocking? Why me? Why am I able to do this? I don't take it for granted. I really live my life where every day is a blessing. Even if it's a bad day, it's still a blessing because I'm here.
Yeah, and growing up, right, at some point, you stopped being Sonny's son, kind of watching that world, and you made the decision to go in, right, yourself. What did that actually look like?
Well, understand, the mob life, the mafia life, the gang life are evil lifestyles. Now, why do I say they're evil? I'm not calling the guys evil. There were some good guys in that life. Age-old question, why do good people do bad things? Well, they're misled, they have wrong influences in their life, they make bad decisions. Doesn't mean they have a bad heart and they're evil people. But the life is evil. And the reason I say that is because I don't know any family of any member of that life that hasn't been totally destroyed, including my own. Not my wife and kids. I've been able to preserve them through God's blessing. But my mother, 33 years without her husband, because my dad did 40 years in prison. When she passed away, her relationship with my dad was ugly because she blamed him for everything that went wrong, rightfully so. What went wrong? My baby sister dies of an overdose of drugs, 27 years old. She couldn't handle all the turbulence. My brother, a drug addict, 25 years. What I had to do just to keep that kid alive on the streets, you don't even want to know. My other sister was never mentally stable. She dies at the age of 41. So the whole family devastated, except for me. So any lifestyle that does that to any family, the lifestyle that does that to a family is an evil life. And that's one of the major reasons why I walked away. I met a young girl. I fell in love with her. She fell in love with me. I said, am I going to marry this girl? I'm already indicted 7 times. They're going to put me in prison. We had 3 wars in our family, or I'm going to die. One or the other is my fate, without a doubt. Do I want to do this to her? I either got to cut ties with her, or I got to cut ties with the life, and I chose her. And that was the bottom line.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about your wife here in a second. I want to know what was going through your head when you made the decision, because again, pre-med student, you're thinking about being a doctor, and you made a decision, and I know it has something to do with your dad, and you made a decision to get into that life. Let's talk and tell the audience a little bit about why you made that decision to get into the life when that wasn't the path you were on. Strictly
to help my dad get out of prison. I didn't aspire to be a mobster. I wasn't, wow, this is the great life I want to pursue. My dad felt that was the way that when I decided I wasn't going to school, because Joe Colombo had a powerful influence on me. He was the boss of the family. And a lot of my dad's friends telling me, your dad's going to die in prison. And I said, no, I can't let that happen. I went to see my dad. He told me he was framed. He said, I'm innocent. I believed him. If he would have said, I'm guilty and I got to do my time, I probably would have been a doctor. But he said, I'm innocent, and we got to help prove my innocence. Well, what did that mean to me? I can't do it while going to medical school. I had to help my dad. We had to get to the witnesses that testified against him, get them to recant their testimony, have money for lawyers, because people weren't throwing money at my dad when he went to prison. His money ran out. I had to support my family. So I said, okay, school isn't where it's happening. I got to help you, Dad. And that's totally the reason I got into the life. No other reason.
Right, and let's talk about that. Let's dive a little deeper there, because I don't think some of the audience understands that story. If I'm not mistaken, you correct me if I'm wrong, the reason that you believed your dad, because I'm guessing most people watching are saying his dad was in jail, his dad says he's innocent, and he just wants to help his dad, but well, his dad's probably not innocent. But a big part of the reason that you believed your dad was innocent, I'm guessing still believe today, is because you talked about how the people that testified against him were drug addicts. And tell us the story of the stories he would tell you growing up about drugs and how that ended up playing out, and the reason that you truly feel that he was innocent.
Yes. I'll take that to my grave. I know my dad was innocent. He was no bank robber. Absolutely not. I investigated that case. We spoke to every witness. They recanted their testimony. We gave them lie detector tests that proved they lied at the trial. We just could never get the conviction overturned. He was framed on that case. I was guilty of the crime I went to jail for. My dad was innocent of that crime. Maybe he did other things in his life. He was no angel. I'm not saying that. But that particular crime that he did 40 years in prison for, my dad was innocent, and I'll take it to my grave. My dad hated anything to do with drugs. He would create stories about people that died over drugs or whatever. He hated drugs, and he never wanted me to have a motorcycle. He would make up stories about people that got killed in motorcycle crashes, and I would never get a motorcycle. When I told him I wanted one, that's when he started telling me stories about how bad it was. And I trusted my dad. I believed him. So I said, okay, Dad, if you're saying it's no good, I'm not going to do it. And drugs, I have never until this day even smoked a joint. Never taken any kind of drug.
Nothing at all?
No, prescription drugs if I'm given something, and I don't even like that. I'm afraid of drugs. I hate it. I'm afraid I might like it. You know, alcohol. My dad used to tell me 3 things, son, you got to worry about. Wine, meaning alcohol, drugs, and women. He said, those are the 3 things that are going to destroy you.
But you're a wine guy now, aren't you?
Well, yeah. Yes, but not to
that extent.
We don't overconsume.
Right.
Yes. And I get hit up for that too. Every time, you're a Christian and you're selling wine. I have to go into the whole Jesus created, his first miracle was changing water into wine. But anyway, so I believed it. He wouldn't associate with drug addicts. Absolutely not.
And those 3 guys were drug addicts.
4 of them. They're all drug addicts, yeah. All of them were involved in drugs. And what they did, they committed all these bank robberies. They just created a meeting where they said my dad told them to do it. That was it. One meeting, one time. They never even handed him money. How he got convicted, his lawyer, whatever. But anyway, so yeah, I believed him. And he said, son, if you're going to help me out and you're going to be on the street to help me, you need to become part of my life. Okay, Dad. I'm ready.
And that's what you did. Okay, so let's talk about the next steps after that, because you didn't right away start making $8 million a week. What did those first years look like, right? Before the money, before the scale, what were you actually doing day to day?
Well, at 20 years old, when I hit the street, I became a target of law enforcement. I got indicted 5 times. I went to trial for 1.5 years almost on nonsense crimes, but they kept me in the courthouse. I got 3 hung juries on one case. Another one was dismissed, and they just kept, wearing me down. So I was totally broke at 21. Didn't have a penny. Paid for my lawyer as best. I had a bad lawyer, paid for him as best I could, and I was broke. So I had to get into something. I could not stand not having money in my pocket. I just couldn't. I couldn't sleep. I'm still that way, right? So I had to try to get going, anything that I can get going. And it started out with me being in the car business and hustling and working 24/7. And then when I got involved in the life, I started doing things on the street. And I mean, we'll be here for, the next 10 hours if we get into all of that. But that's how it started for me.
And you ran, right, at some point, what the FBI says was $1 billion operation. When you were in it at the peak, did you know how extraordinary it was, or were you just kind of like, I'm solving the next problem, I'm moving day to day?
I started to understand it early on. I realized this could be a gold mine, a bonanza, and that's why I dove into it so heavily. And really was able to, the guy that brought me the idea and was really the architect of it, but it had a lot of holes in it, and it would never have worked if we didn't concrete all those holes and get it to work seamlessly. And I was able to assist him heavily in that. And I was able to get the licenses that we needed and everything. And I said, man, if I took this across the country and I would have been making billions a month. Because with collecting tax on gasoline, think of it. In New York alone, The federal and the state tax was 40 cents a gallon, depending upon where you were located. And we were doing 500 million gallons of gas a month.
500 million?
500 million. And we were paying no tax. We weren't paying like a little. We were paying no tax.
You were pocketing, the scheme was to pocket
Everything.
the tax. And it might take them 10 months or so to figure it out, set up a new company. So you were...
I had 18 shell companies, and every one of them were formed in Panama.
And you were able to continue to operate that for years, and you were just pocketing millions of dollars. Not on top of that, you were able to deliver gas to gas stations at a lower cost than they would have been paying. So they wanted to do business with you.
They were happy.
It was easy.
I would go to a gas station, let's say it was a mobile station, and I would say, how many loads of gas are you getting from mobile? Oh, we get 6 loads a week. I said, well, buy 4 from them and 2 from us. We'll save you 10 cents a gallon. That's a lot of money for them, 10 cents a gallon. Before you know it, they're trying to buy all 6 from us. And I said, you can't do that. You're going to lose your brand. You have to buy some from mobile. So we had to chase people away. And I'll tell you even more. The major companies, like I bought a terminal from BP, British Petroleum. They loved us. The major companies, we were buying barges from them as they came from the Middle East. We were buying the barges. We were selling it back to their own stations. They didn't care because we were increasing the volume. The FBI went to them and said, the Mafia, you're dealing with Mafia guys. Oh, we'll be careful. And then they'd call us up and say, hey, the feds were here, be careful.
So they would tip you off.
Everybody but the government was happy. Everybody. People on the street were happy. They were paying less at the pumps. The major brands were happy because we were buying more gas. Only the government got hurt.
Wow. And so that version of you at 35, right? $10 million in cash a week. You're on Fortune list. You have, I think, a jet, a helicopter. You have many houses. What would he think of where you are today? What would he maybe respect, and what would he think is weak?
I have to say this, and I'm going to get beat up for it, but I don't have a moral issue with defrauding the government. I tax on every gallon of gasoline, especially today when they're doing it in Minnesota and they're pocketing themselves. I would at least give it back to the people. I would share it. I would be beneficial in that regard. But I won't do it because I'm not going to get in trouble or jeopardize my family. But, look, I was happy with my accomplishments to that point. I have to say that. And throughout all of this, understand this. I'm a major target of law enforcement. I was indicted 7 times. There wasn't a day when I didn't have an investigation on me. From the time I was 20 years old, they were watching me every day. 7 indictments. Excuse me. 2 major racketeering cases with the feds and 1 with the state of Florida. So I had to be dodging bullets from the state and the feds and also my own people, because as I'm progressing through that life, I got a target on my back from other people. It was tough to deal with, honestly. I'm not saying I didn't have peace because, I worked 7 days a week, but it was a lot to deal with at a young age. And I don't know how I was resilient. I can't, you don't claim credit for this thing. When you just have that built, you're just fortunate. I can't say, well, I studied this and I was such a good learner that I created. No, I was just born with this innate quality that allowed me to get through all of this. I don't know what to say. Yeah.
And how do you see that life today? An evil life? When you look back?
I see I have, I'm ambivalent. And sometimes I have issues with my wife because I say, oh, these were good guys. And she's from a perfectly legitimate and reasonable perception of this. So, well, how could you say they were good? They killed people and this and that. But there was a lot of good people there that I missed and that I really cared for. I had good friends in that life. And I miss them because they're all gone. So did I hate the life? No. When I left the life, I didn't hate anybody. I wasn't mad at anybody. I didn't leave because, these people were after me. When they were after me, they were supposed to be after me because I left the life and I wasn't supposed to do that. So I understood that. I wasn't mad at them. I think if I would have got killed, I couldn't even be mad at somebody because I was supposed to get killed according to the oath that I took. This sounds crazy, but that's how I believe. Even with my father, they said, your father he went along with the contract on your life. I kind of understood that. I don't think he would have ever done it. He would have never put a gun to my head. There's no way. I don't care what anybody says. No way my dad would have done that. But did he go along with it maybe to protect himself and not to, he didn't know what I was going to do? Okay, I get it. I understand. Now, maybe that's a crazy way to think, because my wife says to me, you would never do that to your son. Well, of course I wouldn't. Different circumstances, and like I said, I don't know. Maybe I have a crazy way of thinking, but it's just the way I feel.
It seems the people in that life, or at least the people you're talking about, you mean yourself and your father, you kind of followed the rules of that life, even if it meant putting those rules over your own family at times, potentially, when you were in that life.
That's the one discussion I had with my dad, and that was kind of a deal breaker for me. Because when I sat down with my dad after my mother had passed away, and I said, our whole family was destroyed, Dad, because of this life. And he said, well, it wasn't my fault. I said, what do you mean it wasn't your fault? He said, well, I was framed for a crime I didn't commit. If that wasn't the case, none of this would have happened. I said, Dad, you were framed not because you were a doctor or a lawyer or a priest. You were framed because you're a mob guy. We got to expect those things, And he said, it's not my fault. And he kind of blamed my mom. And I said, come on, Dad, you got to take responsibility for the destruction in our family. And he wouldn't. Now, maybe that was guilt. I understood, and I didn't want to press him too hard. But it was upsetting that he wouldn't take responsibility, because I thought we were close enough where he could have said, you know what, son, you're right. You're right. But he didn't.
An FBI informant once put your name next to 5 murders. You were never charged with any of them, but what do you think of those accusations? Well,
they were false, number one. And number two, the informant that brought the story and really tried to jam me up with it, he was later thrown out of the witness protection program for lying. And everything that he said was just dismissed, because he implicated me and a number of other people. So, and I told the FBI he's lying. I said, I knew the guy very well. So it turned out to be a false accusation and something that I was fighting against.
And were you involved in those deaths in any way at all?
No.
And the person that you're talking about, Big Sal?
Big Sal, yeah.
Right. He named specific murders.
Yes.
Not the accusations generally, the specific incidents he named. Walk me through, where were you? What did you know about those? Were those just made up incidents? Were they incidents that actually happened that were tied to the family in some way?
Well, these people were murdered. No question. He didn't make up that somebody got murdered that wasn't murdered. They were murdered. But he implicated the wrong people. I mean, bottom line. And he was probably involved in all of them. And, listen, one thing that I am sorry, and I don't know if you saw the Jubilee when I sat down with 20 different cops and we went into this. I do not believe that people are entitled to a free pass when they've committed a murder and they bargain with the government and they give them a pass on those murders, to implicate other people. It's strong incentive to lie. Strong incentive to lie. And they shouldn't be given that advantage. So I think in this case, that's exactly what happened with Machota. I knew him well. He wasn't one of the more prominent guys in that life. Let me be kind to him right now, even though he doesn't deserve that, but I'll be kind to him. So he made up like other informants. I'm going to tell you this, and I'll stand by this. I've been to trial 5 times, and I've visited, I can't tell you how many other trials. I've been to 3 trials of my dad's. I've never seen a government informant get up on the stand, left hand on the Bible, right hand swear to tell the truth, and lie through their teeth. And the government doesn't care as long as the lie is fitting into the story and it can't be caught. They don't care. That's the problem you have with these informants. They buy themselves out by telling stories, and that's exactly what happened with Machota.
Yeah, in the world you were in, were those type of accusations common and those type of deals very common?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a case right now, I'm going to be honest, my dear friend, Michael Sessa, who did 34 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, because a prosecutor and FBI lied and implicated him and then withheld testimony that could have put him out of prison. I'm trying to get him a pardon right now. Poor guy, 34 years in prison because a prosecutor lied, Andrew Weissman, I'll mention his name, and Lynn DeVecchio, an FBI agent that was charged with 4 murders because he was feeding information to...
An FBI agent?
He was charged with 4 murders.
With 4 murders?
4 murders. And the reason was he was feeding information to an FBI informant who I knew very well, Greg Scarpa, big name out there. And Greg Scarpa was taking that information and killing people. murdering them.
Oh my God.
Based upon it, FBI. This is a fact, documentation, nothing. I don't make anything up. So this is what happens in that life. So you don't give informants the ability to hurt other people and giving them the incentive to lie. Listen, John Gotti. Anybody would believe any story about John Gotti because they wanted him so bad. And people were lining up to give stories about him. I'm not saying every one of them lied, but you certainly have incentive to lie. You think John Gotti was the worst person out there? No, he just happened to be the biggest name. He just happened to make careers. People wanted him. The FBI were drooling to get a hold of him because they get careers made on this. So I don't like the system at all. I don't like informant system at all. I'm sorry. They get too much of an advantage for lying.
And how do you think that could be changed? Is that just incentives? Is that some laws that need to be changed?
I mean, there has to be a limit to what, okay, you're going to help the government, but there has to be a limit to the advantage that you get. If you murdered, a number of people, you shouldn't be walking the street because you implicated somebody else. If you commit 10 murders, right, and you're implicating a guy that committed 2, why should you get a bigger advantage? Because he has a bigger name than you. And that's what happens. That's the system. And I challenge anybody to, because when I say this, I know it. I lived it and I know it. I challenge anybody to challenge me on that because I'll give them the evidence.
And what do you think of karma, right? Because you talk about your dad, you talk about your good friend who served time for what you say is something that they're innocent of, but maybe they did some other bad stuff in their life that they were guilty of that they didn't get charged for. And maybe that's just the karma that they ended up getting, in their life. What do you think of that?
I believe that, but I don't think it's the government's, shouldn't impose that karma.
Maybe that's not the government. Maybe that's God's way of doing it.
Well, maybe, but the government doesn't have let me tell you something. Our government has all the tools, all the money, all the time, all the weapons, all the laws. They don't have the right to frame somebody because of something they believe they did. They have enough weapons to go and get somebody. Because if you allow that, just think of it, Will, if you allow that, what do we really have? Government, anytime they want to put something on you, they'll do whether you did it or not. Well, you didn't do this, but you got away with a number of things. You can't have that. We would be a dictatorship and an anarchy.
Okay, let's talk about Larry, Champagne Larry.
Okay. You're going heavy on this, but I'm ready for you. It's okay.
All right. He was the godfather of 3 of your children.
2.
2.
Yeah.
2 of your children. And you said, and I want to quote you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I knew it was going to happen and I didn't save him.
Yeah.
When you knew it was going to happen, what was going through your head? And talk about your relationship with Larry.
I loved him like a brother. He was one of my dearest friends. Our families were close. But he made, with respect to that life, he made a very serious mistake. And here's the painful part of it. I believe that the consequences were severe because I tried to get him, I was a captain, and I tried to get him in my crew. And the boss at the time wouldn't allow it because they didn't want us to, he was a good guy on the street. He was an undertaker. He was a pretty good earner. And I wanted him with me because we were close, we were like brothers. But they wouldn't give him to me. And they kept him with somebody else, and he was resentful of that, and I didn't care for it either. But I think that I tried to save him. He did something he shouldn't have done, no question about it.
What did he do? Can you tell me that?
He had an affair with my sister. He was married at the time. And this was brought to my attention. I didn't know it. I didn't discover it. My sister didn't tell me. It was brought to my attention. And the decision was made that it was very disrespectful to me and then to my father. And when I argued, and I said, listen, he's not a made guy. He made a mistake. I can correct it. No, your father's been in this life a long time, and so have you, and we don't allow that. So it was very painful, even though I knew that he what he did was wrong. No question about it.
How did you feel? Did you feel disrespected because this is something that you didn't even know was happening?
I did feel disrespected, but I mean, come on, to pay for it with your life.
So I'm guessing you didn't pull the trigger, but you were maybe part of a sit down or You knew this was going to happen.
Well, let's put it this way. They didn't give me specifics. And at the time I asked, I said, listen, why don't you consult my father about this? My dad was in prison at the time. I said, why don't you consult him? If you're saying that it's disrespectful for him, why don't we get his opinion on it? And I honestly don't know if that ever happened. I don't know that. But at some point it was out of my hands.
Does that line between ordering it, doing it, or allowing it actually mean anything?
Let's put it this way. That doesn't only apply to Larry. When I was 20 years in that life, you know, I knew a lot of guys that made mistakes and were gone after that. So if you're part of that life, don't you have to take responsibility for all of it? It's not any one particular person, because you're part of the life. You know, things go down. But that's part of the evils of the life. Yeah.
Right up until that happened, were you guys very close? Like you said, you were basically best friends.
Yeah.
And so does that still stay with you today?
Sure it does. It stayed with me to a point where a few years back, I got an email from somebody really close to him, one of his kids. And it was a very painful email for me to read. And it took me a while to digest it. And then I responded. And the email that I got back really was a blessing, because that person understood what went down. Because people, I mean, look, I get the blame for that. I mean, Michelta lied and said that Larry was part of the gasoline business. He never had anything to do with gas. Total fabrication, 100% lie, had zero to do with it. Never. And he said he made that up. That was part of the reason that Larry got killed. Not true at all. It was one reason only. Aside from, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I was also told that he was dealing drugs. I happen to know that there was a little bit of truth in that. I'll leave it at that. But as far as him being involved in gas, absolutely. But he had to embellish his reasoning with me for some reason. But, you know, people say that, I hear it on social media and all this kind of stuff. But look, of course it's painful. And he's not the only one. I mean, there are other people I knew that were gone. Not that I could have done anything about it. See, that's the thing. If a decision is made, it's out of my hands at that point. I can't do anything about it. Now, could you have warned him? That's up for me to internally deal with.
Right. If you could go back, not before, let's say, the order came, but to the moment where you could have warned him, what would you have done?
I don't know that I would have.
Really? Why?
I mean, I was part of that life. You know, I mean, look, a strong case was made about it. Now, nobody said to me, this is what's going to happen. You know, I felt pretty concerned when I walked out of the room after this was laid out to me. But, you know, when I left, I said, like I said, consult the people, let me think about it, you know. And I was told straight out, we don't want you talking to anybody about this.
And how long after that meeting was he dead?
It was a while.
Did you talk to him after you found out what he did, between that time and his death?
About that? No.
At all? Any conversations with him?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, this is, you know, almost 40 years ago now.
When you talked to him, did you confront him about what he did, or did you just
I did not.
You played along as you guys are just friends still?
Yeah.
Okay, let's pivot. So your children were kind of growing up through this, right? When did they find out, right, who their father actually was, and what did that conversation look like?
Well, my kids knew early on because, again, I had a lot of publicity. But my kids, until today, don't talk to me about it. They don't question me. They don't ask me anything about it. I don't understand that, honestly. They're not inquisitive. My two daughters now have a podcast, and I think me sitting down with them in their podcast, I finally got some of their thoughts about what they thought about me during that time, you know? They don't ask me about it. I don't know why. I think I have to credit my wife, where she just, you know, she raised them properly, and even when I was away, they were cared for the right way, and I can't explain it. I don't know why. It's kind of baffling to me at times. Hey, why don't you sit, hey, Dad, what went on there? No, nothing. So, but I guess that's a good thing. You know, it's a
So
good
you
thing.
didn't, when you're growing up, there wasn't conversations about who you are, what you're doing, the
No.
life you're involved in. You just kind of treat it as like, let's just try to give them as normal of a childhood as we can.
Yeah,
but I still have the feds here, and I got a lot of
They
big
lived
business
through
I'm
it.
running.
Yeah, they lived through it. I never forget once. I was in LA County Jail. They had me there for some reason, and my wife and Dad's in school, and then my oldest daughter at the time, well, how come it says LA County Jail on this? We had to explain that. But, I'm happy. Look, I don't want to sit down and talk to them about my former life. Same way I don't want to sit with my wife. I've never had to sit down and have a conversation. What my wife is hearing now is more than she ever heard in 40 years, 42 years. Never discussed any of this because I don't want to. And fortunately, they don't bug me about it or ask me about it because it's yesterday's stuff.
You were in a world where people getting hurt wasn't the exception. This was just kind of part of how it worked, right? How did you carry that, right? How did you carry? Were you just like, look, this is the life. We got the blood oath. I'm following the rules. Did you step outside yourself a little bit when you had to make certain hard decisions?
Well, I don't want you to, there's a thought process out there, maybe the movies, that people go around killing each other all day. That's not the way it is. We live our life and we do our business. Every once in a while, something comes down. It's not normal course of business. And we don't look at it that way and we don't treat it that way. But when it happens, it happens, For the smart people in that life, it's the last course of action. You talk about a guy like Roy DeMeo, you probably heard his name. Roy DeMeo, Greg Scarpa, these were serial killers. They would have been killers if they weren't in the Mafia. The Mafia just made it a little bit easier for them. But that wasn't the normal course of business for most of us. Certainly wasn't for me and many of the guys that I knew. You don't want to, that's not what the life is about. It's not, hey, let's get rid of it. Let's kill it. No, it wasn't with that. When it happened, it was a serious situation. It was well thought out. Only the boss could make that decision. And it wasn't everyday normal life.
Right. Everyday normal life was what? Making money for the family, living your life. There may be some orders that you have to follow from the boss. And you weren't, like you said, making those final calls or decisions. You were part of sit downs and you were giving input. And in a lot of cases, you were being forgiving. You were rooting for the underdog. And obviously, there was some other cases that are tough. And at the end of the day, either way, they were completely out of your hands, the final decision.
Always, yeah. I wasn't a boss. Only the boss makes that decision. He can consult with who he wants to, but it's his final decision.
Talk to the people about the hierarchy, right? You have soldiers, go ahead.
Well, the official people in that life, people that took the oath, you have the boss who's on top. He's a dictator. You have the underboss, who's his second in command. You have a consigliere, who is his advisor. And then you have the capo regimes, or captains, and they have a crew of soldiers, and the soldiers are the lowest level, and they've all taken the oath. There's no lieutenants, there's no sergeants or anything like that. That's the rankings. And the final say is always with the boss on anything of real importance. Now, the way the protocol worked, if you're a soldier, you're not supposed to go directly to the boss or the underboss. You go to your capo regime. That's why I get beat up all the time because they call me a mob boss. Well, you weren't the boss. I was a capo regime. They were the street boss. In other words, the soldiers had to go to me first before they can go to the boss about anything. That's the proper protocol. So, in essence, I was a boss of those guys. And how did I get those guys? The boss assigned them to me. That's how it goes. So, and then you had associates that worked with us but didn't have the privilege or the rights of a made guy. And that's it. And I had a lot of associates.
How many associates do you have?
God.
Hundreds?
I probably had 15 guys in my crew, 15, 18 guys in my crew that were made, and then I might have had, 50 associates at the time. Yeah, I don't know the number.
And the associates didn't take the oath. They weren't part of the Mafia or mob, but they were people on the streets that you guys dealt with.
And in order to take the oath, your father must be Italian.
And so you talked about how you were being wiretapped and investigated for years, right? You were in front of grand juries, and all that time you kept running the operation, right? what does that kind of sustained pressure do to you?
A couple of years ago, I had that, I forget what they call it, but when you lose your beard a little bit, for whatever reason. And so I go to the doctor, I said, what's going on? And he said, well, you have, I forget the name of it. And he said, it's normally caused by stress. Do you have a lot of stress? I say, Doc, I don't know. I mean, I grew up one way all my life. I mean, I always had stuff going on. I don't know what stress is, honestly. I don't even, anxiety, what is anxiety? Now I get a little bit of anxiety when I'm ready to leave to go on a speaking engagement, not because of the plane, because I don't want to leave my house. I love my wife. I want to stay home. I don't want to travel anymore. I've been traveling for 30 years. So I get anxious thinking, oh, here I go again. But other than that, I don't know what stress is because I just live a certain way and I think I handle it the way I handle it.
And when you were being wiretapped or investigated, when you were on the streets, were you making certain decisions knowing that they were listening or watching you?
Oh, all my decisions. I mean, knowing that somebody could be watching me or whatever. I mean, my dad used to hold up the telephone and say, this is a cop. Don't talk on the phone. And I never got caught saying anything that would hurt me on a telephone. I had an FBI investigation. They had 83 tape recordings on me and couldn't use one of them to hurt me because I just knew I wasn't sure who I was talking to. So I was always very careful in that regard because I was prepared for it. But yeah, I always knew that whatever I was doing, people were watching. And, if I didn't know somebody well, I just didn't trust talking in front of them. I was very careful in that regard.
And this entire time, were you going to church as well or not yet?
No. I grew up Catholic, but I wasn't practicing. I mean, after I got out of school, because I went to Catholic school, I wasn't really practicing. I didn't go to church on Sunday.
How did you balance, trying to raise your family and run a criminal empire at the same time, right? Without one of those breaking? Or were you just, I'm working 7 days a week, I'll see the family when I can? Or were you trying to balance both of them and give some time to the family as well as trying to build up this organization?
Well, I did in my first marriage, and I had 3 children from my first marriage, but I was really more concerned, that's not the right word. I mean, I cared for my family, gave them everything, no problem there. They didn't have a lot of my time because I was extremely aggressive on the street. I worked 7 days a week if I needed to. That became first. That was wrong. It wasn't the right way to go. And as a result, the marriage didn't last. But, what could I say? I mean, I tried to balance it, but it was an imbalance because I was more concerned about making a living and doing what I was supposed to do on the street and saying, oh, my family's got everything they need, no worries. A mistake that a lot of people make. You don't have to be in a mob to make that mistake. A lot of guys in business that I talked to made the same mistake. Thriving company, you probably know this, making billions, and their home life is falling apart. One of the things when I went to prison that concerned me more than anything, I watched my dad and mom grow apart in prison. Because when my dad went to prison, it was different. 1 3-minute phone call a month and 1 visit a month. The family absolutely, you grow apart. My mom and dad grew apart. So I was determined not to let that happen to me when I went to prison. I told them in prison, I said, hey, you can lock me up 24/7. Just let me have my phone and let me have my visits. I don't care what I eat. I don't care what I do. I just want my phone calls and my visits because I wanted to maintain a relationship with my wife because prison is not conducive to a healthy marriage. So I worked hard to do that when I was in prison, and I try to do that now. I've tried to do that because I didn't want my marriage to fall apart. It's very difficult. So
it seems like that made a big impact on your life, seeing your mom and dad and what his time in prison did to the whole family. And let's transition that to your wife, Camille, who is here and who I've met, right? Who was she when you met her, and what did she actually see when she looked at your life?
Well, she didn't know my life, fortunately, and I didn't broadcast it. She thought I was a film producer, which I was, but that was kind of my second job, or my 5th job, I should say. But, she just saw me as a film producer. She didn't know anything. She was from Anaheim, California. She saw the Godfather movie once and thought it was, fiction. So she didn't have any concept of life. And I didn't sit down and tell her, oh, by the way, this is who I am and this is what I do. So fortunately, she fell in love with me before all the catastrophe hit. And a number of my other indictments came down, and the prison and all of that, the trials in the prison. So I can say this, that God saved my life through that woman, because I wouldn't have left the life if I didn't meet her. Why? I only left to preserve my life with her. I didn't leave it because I was mad at anybody. I hated the government at that point. I beat them 6 times at trial. I figured I'll just keep beating, 5 times at trial. I'll just keep beating them. Let them keep coming. I'll keep beating them. That's my attitude back then. So, but I meet her and everything changes.
Yeah, so you met her, and how long after that did she start to figure out what you were into?
Well, since I kept getting arrested, she kind of figured something was up.
Okay, and so how long was that? Was that right away after you met her? You said you fell in love, so you fell in love quick, and then boom, right away you're getting indicted?
It was pretty quick, yeah.
Okay.
I met her, she was 19, turning 20, and we had a fairy tale relationship for about a week. No, it didn't last that long before the roof started to really cave in on me.
Oh, wow.
And so she got a taste of it, but I always told her, don't worry about it, I'm going to handle it. You know, it's going to be okay. You know, I got arrested on Friday, I was out by Monday, you know, that kind of thing, and life went on. And then, of course, I'm on trial for several months with Giuliani, and, you know, a lot of stuff started to happen, so she got it. But if I don't meet her, I never would have lasted. I would have been dead or in prison, there's no question. So I can't call her a savior, because nobody is a savior on this earth, but I believe that God saved me through her.
Was she telling you, like, hey, we got to get you out of this life? Was it a push from her, or was it just your own, like, hey, I love her, I want to have a family, I don't want her to be involved in any of this, I need to do it on my own and get out the life?
100%. It was me realizing that, what am I going to do to this girl? I'm going to marry her and go away to prison forever, or get killed in the next war that we have in the family? I said, why would I do that to her? And I wouldn't marry her. I was on trial with Giuliani, and I wouldn't marry her during that trial, because Rudy told me in the courtroom, he said, if I convict you on this the day of my arraignment, I'm giving you 100 years. You're going to get double what your father got. So how could I, in good conscience, marry a girl and go away for 100 years? Made no sense. But the day I got acquitted on a Friday, on Saturday, she was in New York waiting for me. I didn't tell her that the jury was coming in with the verdict, because the jury was out, I don't know, 5-6 days. I didn't tell her because I knew they were going to take me away that day, and that would have been the end of it, and I would have had to tell her, you know, go find a life because I'm done. But I got acquitted on a Friday. I called her up. I said, get ready, we're going to Vegas tomorrow and we're getting married. And that's exactly what we did. On May 9th, I got acquitted on May 8th. On May 9th, we went and got married in Vegas, and then I gave her a big wedding. We got married a second time in July in California with the family and everything. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to do that to her. Plus, it would have been too painful. I love this girl, and being in prison and losing her to some other guy that I probably want to kill. Sorry about that, everybody. And that's why I took a plea. Because believe it or not, 10 years, I knew that I'd have a life after that. If she would hang in there with me, we could have a life. And that was the whole plan.
I mean, you tried something that never worked, right? You're if I'm not mistaken, the only high-ranking made man who publicly walked away from the mob in his prime and survived, and she was a huge part of that, right? She was the reason why. And so was there a single moment where you just realized, I'm done with this life? Or was it that, was it meeting her and it was like that's it? Or was it a bunch of these moments, these little moments throughout where you realized, look, this is an evil life, I don't want to be part of this, and eventually you met her and that was just the trigger, like, you know what, I'm going to move?
Let's put it this way. I knew that eventually I was going to go down. I knew that, even though I beat him all those times. The Giuliani victory was huge for me, huge. So here I am. I beat a huge federal case. And here's the thing. The witness against me in the Giuliani case, who we destroyed on the stand, was the witness against me in the gasoline case. We already beat him up. He was a terrible witness. So I go to trial on the gas case. I probably win again because he was a horrible witness. But I'm not going to take a chance now with this girl because I'm going away forever if I lose. If she's not there, I go to trial. I definitely go to trial because I said I would have beat him again. And what else can they do to me? I beat him every time. You know, it's going to take them years to build another case against me. So, again, I didn't leave the life because I was mad. It was strictly because of her. Did I know it was tough roads ahead with the RICO case and all that, with RICO statute? Yeah. But I figured, hey, I'll beat him. That was my attitude. So it was strictly her.
And was that the hardest kind of decision you've ever had to make, to leave the life?
It was terribly hard because I felt like I was betraying my oath, betraying my father, betraying my guys. I really struggled with it. I would go to sleep at night, walking away, wake up in the morning, no, I'm back in. It was very, very difficult. It was one of the most emotionally triggered times in my life. Not because I loved the life so much, because I felt like I was betraying something that I took very seriously.
Yeah, because it seems like you had a bond with those people in that
did.
life. And you knew that you were going to break that bond. And when you announced you were leaving, if I'm not mistaken, the boss put a contract on your life.
Yeah, he took it very personal.
And your own father, allegedly, you tell me, approved it. What was it like to get that information, to understand your father allegedly or potentially had signed off on your death?
Well, listen, I didn't live in a vacuum. I knew when I walked in, it became public. I knew that my boss was coming after me, there's no question. When I heard about my dad, again, I think things out. When I heard the feds came into the prison and said, your dad went along with the contract, we got word from our informants, it's all over the street. And my words to them would, let me worry about my dad. I'll worry about my dad. Again, there's some part of that if I was going to be bad, because here's what the feds did. They played dirty. They put my name on a witness list of many trials that were coming up in New York. And I was sending word to my dad, don't believe it, I'm not coming in. But that's what everybody says. And then all of a sudden they're on the witness stand. So that's what they were so concerned, because I'm going to tell you here right now, I could have buried a lot of people. Not only in my family, but in other families. I mean, I knew Fat Tony Salerno very, very well. He was the boss of the Genovese family. Chin Giganti, knew him pretty well. Okay, and a lot of guys down the road. I had a very high profile in that life. Why? I was in the gas business. People were making money around me, so everybody wanted to know me, meet me, whatever. And I had a lot of stuff that I did with a lot of people. I moved around in that life. I could have hurt a lot of people. Ed McDonald said that. Ed McDonald said he was a prosecutor. He said Franzese could have hurt everybody because he knew how active I was. But I wasn't into that. And anybody listening now should understand that. I could have buried a lot of people and I didn't do it because I wouldn't do it. It's not who I am. Couldn't do that. I couldn't live with myself if I did that. But the feds played me dirty in that regard. And I will tell you this. Was I concerned about my dad to I don't know, Yes. I didn't see my dad for 10 years after this. And after it all became, and I did my time in prison and all that, and nobody got hurt, then he finally got in touch with me. He said, I need to see you. I said, okay, I'm ready. He said, meet me in such and such a place. I said, no, Dad, I'm not meeting you any place. I'll meet you at your house. Because I'm not stupid. Maybe somebody was following him. Who knows, Look, I knew that life pretty well. I understood it pretty well. I didn't leave in a vacuum like, okay, nobody's going to come after me. No, I knew what I had to do. I changed my whole routine in life. And I sat down with him, and I walked into his house at 5:30 in the morning, and I hadn't seen him for 10 years. And he looked at me and he said, if you would have listened to me, you'd have been a boss of the Colombo family. Those are the first words he uttered to me, because that's what he expected. He wanted me to go the distance. That was his dream, for me to be the boss and him being in the background because he had lifetime parole to advise me. And I looked at him, I said, Dad, are you in the Twilight Zone? I said, I serve a different boss now. And he looked at me, he said, you serious about all this Bible stuff? And I said, yeah, I am. He said, all right, let's talk. And we spoke for about 3 hours and broke the ice on everything. And all these people out there, they're, you and your father, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. None of them. They just like to talk, and, because I have a name, they want to, get views on my name. They don't know what the hell they're talking about the relationship between me and my dad. And anybody who wants to talk about, I supported my dad for 25 years, and my family, and my mom, and my brothers and sisters, and did it all while he was away. But when I decided to make a break, things had to be different, period. It was my family and my kids that I was worried about. I'm sorry. But you call me selfish or whatever, but that was it.
That had to be an emotional conversation. You haven't talked to him for 10 years. You're getting out of the life. You're out of the life. he's thinking, hey, you could have been the boss, and you're like, no, I'm on a different path. I'm over here. And you guys had to go back and maybe touch on some of the things that happened.
We did, and it was a very in-depth conversation. And I said to him, and people are going to get upset about this, but I'm going to tell you, and I don't cuss online, but I'm going to say it now because I want to repeat my dad's words. My dad told me many times, son, this life is full of shit, right? He would say it just like that while we were in the life. And I said, yeah, Dad, I get it, but this is our life. So he understood that. My dad didn't have blinders on. It wasn't, this law. But the problem with my dad, his legacy in that life was more important to him than anything. He wanted to be known as the guy that died with his boots on. You could put ice picks in his eyes, you could pull out his tongue, you can do whatever. He was never going to cooperate with the government because that would destroy his ego. And I kind of understood it, but at the expense of his family is what I didn't understand. Because many times when my dad was on parole, after his third parole violation when he got out, I said, Dad, you need to get out of New York. Our family is falling apart. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do it, couldn't do it. I said, come to Florida, I got plenty of money. I can set you up anywhere you want to go. Get out of New York, you can't survive here. He wouldn't do it. So basically, he loved his family, don't get me wrong. I'll never say he didn't love, but he put the life in front of his family, and I wasn't willing to do that. And that's the difference between the two of us in that regard. So yeah, I sat down and made the cops understand that I'm out of the life. But don't tell me I'm going to testify against people and hurt my former friends. No, I'm not doing that. Put me in solitary for 3 years, put me on diesel therapy, do whatever the hell you want. I'm not going to do that. And the bottom line is, like I said, yeah, I'm getting a little riled up now because you give me an opportunity to answer some people that I won't answer directly because I don't stoop to that level online. But people that talk and, your relationship, they don't know what the hell they're talking about in plain English. They don't know what we went through as a family, my relationship with my dad and anything else that went on. They don't know, but they want to talk to get views. It's okay. Don't bother me. But I can answer it now.
Who are these? Are these some specific people?
It doesn't matter. No, I'm not going to go there, but it doesn't matter. But they know who they are.
Right. Okay, let's talk about God, right? You found God in prison?
You found God. I knew God. I like to say that God finds us. We don't find him. At his appropriate right time, he finds us. And he found me and made an impression on me when I was at my lowest, yes.
And for someone watching who has maybe no faith, maybe they're skeptical of this.
Well, let me say this too. I want to answer that. For the ignorant people out there that say, oh, wow, he found God in prison. Well, people find God when they're at their lowest, and prison is their lowest. Prison is fertile ground for God to do his work because people are beat, they're destroyed. Not because they're cowards or anything else, because they have nowhere else to turn. So fortunately, God is available at that point, and God is there to transform their lives. I've seen many, many, many honest conversions in prison, including my own. And people can challenge that, but it's been 40 years for me, so challenge me all you want. But, that's when God is at his best, when we're at our worst, because we need him. We don't think we need him until that point. But he'll take us whenever. When we're at our worst or our best, he'll take us.
Yeah. And you're still here. You're still here right in front of me, right? And other people who went through the same thing that you did trying to leave, they're not here. Do you have a theory for why?
Well, yeah, my theory is very simple. God had a different plan and purpose for my life. He's made it crystal clear for me, evident. I didn't think I was going to be doing any of the things that I'm doing. The speaker, whoever thought of that? I didn't plan that. I didn't say, when I come out, I'm going to be speaking to people and changing their lives. I had no clue. But, sometimes a path is laid out for you, and you're fortunate enough to accept it and take it, and then it leads in the right direction. I believe until this minute, my whole life in the mob was a platform that God can use to bring people into the kingdom. I believe that. Because again, I didn't want to be part of that life. I went in there to help my dad. I didn't go there because I wanted to be a mobster. But look at how it's being used. I would go speaking, when I first started speaking, at a church in Minnesota. Nobody knew who the hell I was. I had a big following in New York, maybe California, Florida. Okay, that's where my problems were. But nobody knew me in the Midwest. But on the marquee, the mob guy, standing room only. Wow, I got a platform. Why? thanks to the media, thanks to The Godfather. People are interested in that life. So they give me a platform to go and preach the gospel. Basically, that's what it was. Give me a platform to speak to corporate America because I'm a survivor and I've had success in my life in business. And while I'm doing that, they also hear the gospel because how are you still alive? God had a different purpose for me. Pretty obvious.
When you walked out of that last prison sentence, what did that first year look like, right? Building a normal life and fully making the exit, right? What did that look like?
It was a disaster for me. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, honestly. I made a lot of mistakes. I'm like a fish out of water. My first experience outside of life is getting out of prison, out of New York, out of the things that I knew how to do really well that I couldn't do anymore. I made a mistake. I had severe money problems. I was 8 years. I supported my wife while I was in prison. The government took everything from me, almost. Still think I have money buried someplace, and that's for me to know and for others to find out. How's that?
When you say almost, you were bringing in so much cash, and from what I know, there were some safes, and some were buried here and some were buried there, and I don't know, maybe a birdie told me in my ear, when you got out, you might have had something here and something there.
That's for me to know and for others to find out at some point in time. Listen, all I can say, it was very difficult. I was still on parole. I had to watch myself. I still had guys on the street. Remember, people were still around back then. When I was on parole, one day I come home and there's feds in front of my house, and they told my wife, they went in, I was mad at them because they scared her. They said, if you don't leave, your husband's going to be dead by the weekend. So, because guys were out there to hurt me.
And is this in New York or now in California?
No, it was in California.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, they sent people out. I never even went into full disclosure with my wife. I don't want to scare her till now. But that's many years ago. But there were people out there that were looking to hurt me. Yeah.
Wow. So what did you have to do? Did you have to move, or what was the?
We went to the desert for a couple of days. Yeah, just until things were straightened out, and I made a couple of calls, and everything was okay after that. But I had a couple of things like that I had to deal with. So it was rough. I had a rough couple of years getting back on my feet because the government they were still on me. They were looking for the money. They didn't just say, "Oh, okay, you did your time, goodbye." No. So
how long did that last for?
A while. Yeah, took a while.
Is there any part of that life that you miss?
I miss the camaraderie among the guys. Yeah. There's nothing more powerful than a bond, a brotherhood of brothers, other than a marriage. There's nothing more powerful. I got your back, you got mine. Wherever you go in the world, somebody will be there. You'll have a brother there to take you in. Don't ever worry about your wife, your daughter, your sister, your mother. Nobody's going to mess with them. We have you covered. Powerful. I love that. And we had that relationship with some of the guys. Some of it was real. Some of it, like I said, they just hung on you to get what they can get. But there's nothing more powerful than that. Nothing. So yeah, I miss that part of it. Not now anymore. I'm over it because I have such great relationships. You know what? I'm going to tell you as a Christian, I'll tell you how gracious our God is. That camaraderie he replaced with the fellowship that I have now with my brothers in Christ. My future son-in-law, prince of a guy, we're very close. My other son-in-law, that married my older daughter. I mean, we have this bond and this relation, nothing more powerful than that. And you look for that as men in life. Unfortunately, we have a lot of men that don't realize that today because society has dumbed down the relationship of men and the manhood of men, which I don't like. And I wish that men would get back to understanding that real men, are not a threat to women, they're a benefit to women. Until this day, you could ask my wife, she's sitting there, my wife don't put gas in her car. It's my responsibility.
Camille, you don't put gas in your car?
No, I won't let her. That's my job. When I go away, I'll call for all the doors locked in the house. My wife, if she wanted to work, I would give her that grace. I don't want her to because I don't want any other guy telling my wife what to do. I don't tell her what to do. We have a good relationship between us.
Does she tell you what to do sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I listen. I listen because it's easier, to listen. You know that. My wife's got a strong will. She's independent. But, what I'm saying is men have to be men with women. It's not demeaning to women to be a man. I'll open the door for my wife. I get mad at her if she jumps there in front of me. That's my job. When I walk down the street, she's on the inside, I'm on the outside. Little things like that. I try to make her life easier because that makes me feel good. That's what men do. And she has her role. She's more nurturing. She makes sure that I go to the doctor when I have to go to the doctor. There's food on the table that I buy and she prepares. This is the way it was meant to be. There's nothing demeaning about that. Is she capable of doing a job? Of course she is. She's my videographer. All the video you see, it's my wife's doing.
Hey, good job. Wow.
Crystal clear. That focus on the camera is beautiful. I told her that this morning. It's wonderful. So, but men have to understand we have a role as men, and women have their role as women. It's not demeaning to either sex.
Let's talk to some of the entrepreneurs out there, right? Because they're listening and they want to take some lessons from kind of your life and what you've built. What from everything you've built, let's say, stripped of the context, is actually useful, right, for someone building a company today?
If entrepreneurs, they're going to have an opportunity to sit with me. We're creating a platform now. I've spoken to so many businesses, you know. If they listen to me, they will have a better business and a better family life. Because remember this, your business is a reflection of your personal life. No doubt about it. And you have to have that life in order to be successful and satisfied in your business. I know people that are successful but very unsatisfied because they don't have it all together. When you can figure that out, and I can help them figure that out, that's when they win. So I have so many lessons to teach people in business because I've done it all. I've done it legitimately. I've done it illegitimately. There's a certain pattern that you have to figure. Business is business, whether it's illegal on the street or it's in the boardrooms. Business is business. And I have a great approach to it. I have a proven track record. And it's too much that we'd have to do another whole thing to sit down, but I don't want to give you my secrets unless you join my club.
Share with us, if you can, Michael, share with us one of those lessons. What's one lesson that can be applied?
I'll give you two. Number one, there's no such word as failure. Doesn't exist. Failure is a learning experience, nothing more. We're going to fail at certain things, or we're going to make mistakes. They're a learning experience. If you don't fail, you'll never succeed. And anybody in business will tell you that. It's people that have made it, number one. Number two, it's never anybody else's fault. Anything that goes wrong is always your fault. Take responsibility. Oh, that guy really messed me up. Well, why didn't you know that? Why didn't you see that in him? Why was your perception off when you dealt with that person? And even if you had every excuse as to why, it's still your fault. You know why? Because when you take responsibility for everything, you're never going to make that mistake again. Those are two things very valuable. Number three, networking. Networking. Anytime you present yourself to anybody, I don't care how great the business deal is, you're the product. You're the one that has to be liked, because if they don't like you and they like the product, they'll figure out a way to get the product without you. I know that's what I would do. Hey, I like this, but I don't like him. I'll figure this out. Always remember you're the product. How you present yourself is key. Now, there's a lot that goes along with that. I'm not going to tell you all about that, but there's a lot. And, you know, I feel blessed to be in a position to have done so much in my life that I can share it with people, and I'm happy to do it.
If everyone out there is listening, we have three things from Michael for entrepreneurs. We have, obviously, the last one you said, networking.
Failure doesn't exist. Take it out of your vocabulary.
Learning experience. I've failed so many times, so many different businesses, so you have to learn from those experiences.
Mistakes. Exactly.
You made
mistakes.
Yeah, you don't just crawl on the ground, crawl in a hole, give up. You learn from those experiences, and then you can level up the next time.
Yeah, because think of it, failure is definite. Oh, I failed. Definite, it's over. No, it's a mistake. I learned from that experience how to move forward.
And the third one was ownership, which is owning up. Look, even if you might have hired someone, they make a mistake or they screw something up, taking ownership of it.
Everything.
Instead of saying, that was his fault, that was her fault.
Take responsibility for everything that goes wrong and fix it.
What's the lesson you can only learn when getting it wrong doesn't mean losing a client? In your past life, getting it wrong meant potentially losing your life.
Yeah.
So when you go through that, now in the business world, things are a little easier maybe. You might lose a client or lose a relationship here or there, but it's a lot easier probably than it was.
Yeah, and I always have the attitude, it's not the end of the world. You got to have confidence in yourself and your ability, you know? And I don't like the self-esteem word. I don't like that. You know, confidence is a word. I'm going to tell you this. I love confidence in people. I hate arrogance. And there is a distinction between confidence and arrogance. You know, confidence and narcissism. You know, you know that distinction. So it's good to have confidence, bad to be arrogant because people pick that up right away and they don't like it. I don't like it. I don't care how successful you are, who you are, what your title is. If you're arrogant to me, leave me alone. I don't need that. But have confidence in yourself. All right, so that this didn't work out. It's the last client in the world. You're never going to get another one. Oh, but it was so much money. Well, another one doesn't exist out there. You can't figure out a way around this. Do you have good people around you? Surround yourself with good people. Remember, people who say to me, Michael, you're a brilliant businessman. I say, no, I'm not. Well, what do you mean? You've had all this success. I said, but there's things that I don't like to do, and I don't do them well. But what's my secret? Hire the right people and motivate them to do the job for you. Do what you do best, delegate the rest, and learn how to motivate them.
I love that. And let's talk about today, right? So you're speaking to young people, maybe they're from difficult backgrounds, right? All over the world. And in addition, you're speaking to businesses, right? And so what do you tell them about redemption?
The 10 greatest words that were ever spoken in the history of the world, in the history of civilization, came from Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus was willing to forgive those who persecuted him wrongly. He was innocent. He was on the cross, beaten, brutalized, everything you can imagine, the worst death in the history of civilization. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was willing to forgive even those that did that to him. The Bible is very clear. Thief on the cross. These are not just stories and fairy tales. Jesus did this for a reason. Thief on the cross. Lord, remember me today in your kingdom. You didn't get hung on the cross for being a thief. This was a bad guy throughout his life. He saw something in Jesus, and Jesus saw it was sincere. Because remember, you can't pull a scam on God. I pulled a lot of scams, not on God. That's why people tell me, oh, Michael, you preaching this. Hey, don't worry about it. I'll pay the price. If I'm mocking or or I'm using religion to earn money, I'm going to pay for it when I stand in front of him because he knows my heart. Can't pull a scam. He looked at that thief and what did he say to him? He said, oh, you're a bad guy. You got to pay the price. Today, you'll be with me in paradise. What's stronger than that? What more proof do you need? There is no more. Remember, don't try to pull a scam on God. You ask for forgiveness and you sincerely mean it, and you don't remain in that pattern of sin. You can't remain in a pattern of sin and say that you accepted Christ and you're trying to change. You can't. So anybody can be redeemed. Son of Sam can be redeemed. Some people get insulted by that, and I understand it. Well, he murdered my son and daughter. I know that, and that's hard to accept, and I don't know how I would feel in the same circumstance, but I am not God. I didn't set the rules. I didn't put the playing field down. But that's what God says. I will forgive anybody that sincerely asks for forgiveness. Period. That's what we believe in. If we don't have that, we don't have anything.
Is there a version of your story where the redemption doesn't happen, right? Where you don't find faith, you don't meet Camille, you don't walk away? And what does that man look like?
Well, this man won't be here right now. Look, Will, I'm telling you, I believe with all my heart. There's no question. It's not a question of what I believe. It's just fact. All the guys that I ran with are dead or in prison. All of them. Not one or two. All of them. No. Well, let me correct that. I'm sorry. One guy that I just interviewed on my podcast was made the same night that I was made, but he just got out of prison after 34 years. He's got lung cancer, the poor guy. He's in bad shape. His life was destroyed. Okay, so he's alive. But look at his life. He doesn't have anybody. He's living in a trailer. I feel so bad for him. There's no question the level that I reached in that life and the profile that I had to be dead or in prison. Why would they let me go? There's no way I could survive in that life. No way.
After going through all of it, right? The life, the time in jail, everything, was there anything you would do differently if you can go back?
At what point?
At any point, meaning not get into the life at all, decisions you made during your time in the life, looking at your life now, if you could, right? If you could go back and make a change, a different decision, maybe not to get into life at all, would you do anything differently?
Well, knowing what I know now.
Yes.
Would I have entered the life? No. But I entered the life because I wanted to help my dad. But now I realize that wasn't the only path to help my dad. But as a 20-year-old kid, that's what I believed. as a 75-year-old man. Well, that's not the only way. I didn't help him that much because he still did 40 years in prison, even though I got him out on parole a couple of times. So, no, I would not go back in that life. It's a bad life. Look, whether we like things or not, I love where Jesus said this. I don't totally agree. I have to clarify this. Remember, Jesus is surrounded by all of his followers, and the Pharisees were there looking to nail him. And they tried to outsmart him by giving him a coin with Caesar's imprint on it and say, what do you think about this? Because they knew if he would have said something wrong about not paying his taxes, well, they would have got him. So Jesus looked at him, smarter than all of them, and said, render therefore to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God. They couldn't trap him. But did Jesus really believe that the Romans were doing the right thing, overtaxing his people? Of course not. But he wasn't going to let them put him in a situation where he could have put his people in trouble and himself. He was too smart. So what am I saying? Do I believe we have a great government and they're doing everything right and taxation is great? No, they're horrible. They're defrauding us. They're doing a lot of things. But does that mean I have the right to break the law? No. Jesus taught me that. If it wasn't for that, I'd probably be doing it. Because I don't like a lot of people in government right now. It drives me crazy, some of the things that I hear.
And you're in California.
And I'm in California, where we got the worst of the worst here.
Is there anything that you look back in that life and you're still maybe privately glad that you did? Maybe some things that you couldn't say in a church talk, but you're glad you did?
Yeah. And I couldn't say it on the podcast either. So
Fair enough. When you're gone, what do you want the one-line story of Michael Franzese to be? Not the redemption, the whole thing, the one-line story.
It's funny, I just had a conversation with somebody yesterday who I'm going to engage to work with me, very, very bright young man, along with my future son-in-law. And he said, what's your legacy? Because I have a brand now, and I have, a lot of good things going on. We're into wine and pizza, but I have a brand that people are attracted to now. And a lot of great things are happening as a result of that. And we're being very selective. But, well, Michael, what is it that you want? What's your legacy? And I said, I don't need my name on a building. I don't need the whole world to know me. And I made my mark, and I did something wonderful for civilization. What I wanted, two things. Somebody runs into, hey, did you know Michael Franzese? Yeah, he was a great guy. That's my legacy, and my family. My kids to be proud of me, and maybe I can leave them something that they can build upon when I'm gone. And maybe while I'm here that I can help them with. That's my legacy. My kids and my grandkids, and of course, my wife, she's right there along with me, so it's not that I'm leaving her with that, but and we both talked about this. It's about our kids and our grandkids at this point, and just people having a good word to say about. People that know me. Not people that want to capitalize on my name, but people that know me.
I can hear the emotion in your voice when you say that. It seems like family is so, so important to you.
I get kind of choked up with this because I really do want to leave something for my kids. I mean, look, it's tough. You go through a lot of stuff in life, and your kids should be able to benefit from who you were. And that's really important to me. And I wish, some of you that are listening, I wish you would take more advantage of all the work that I put in throughout my life, so that you could benefit. 'Cause I have no complaints. If I were gone tomorrow, I lived a good life throughout all of it. I have no complaints. God's been very good to me. And I hope that I'm around for a lot longer so that I can continue this for them. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, well, you're spreading a message of positivity. You're telling an amazing story about what you've been through, and hopefully, your story and this story, you're able to make an impact on so many people's lives. So, Michael, I want to thank you so much for being on Decoded Genius.
Well, I want to say this. I didn't expect some of the line of content or questioning, but I appreciate it because it gave me a chance to say some things that I wouldn't have said, on my own. So appreciate that, and I think you did a good job.
Thank you.
You got it.